never old, Michael, and you'll never die. Be one of us.
Notice anything unusual about Santa Carla yet?
It's a pretty cool place. If you're a Martian.
Or a vampire.
Dad.
You know where Hudson's Bluff is? I can't beat your bike. You just have to try and keep up. How far are you willing to go, Michael? Guess first. How are those maggots? Drink some of this, Michael.
Don't. It's blood.
Michael. Now you know what we are. Now you know what you are.
Help me! Stay back! Stay back! Help me! My own brother, a vampire. You wait till Mom finds out, buddy.
You don't want to miss this.
You smell like garlic.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a Tower of Babel podcast. As always, I am Julian Mush. I am joined by nobody. It is just me, and we're going to be doing something weird today. It is 10:46 p.m. In Costa Rica time, which is an hour behind where we usually record, which is Winnipeg time. And due to scheduling conflicts and and all sorts of stuff related to travel and whatnot, I couldn't wrangle Jeremy in time to do this film club that we promised to do before Halloween. So, as I said, we're doing something weird, which is a live stream on an hour and a bit until midnight. And we're going to go until midnight here in Costa Rica on Halloween, talking about the Lost Boys and other spooky season related topics, because officially this is the last possible moment, at least according to my clock, that we can get in on this. So join me. We're going to be talking about, I guess I said, the Lost Boys, which is the 1987 classic vampire film, and then any other odd topics that pop in. This is recorded live on YouTube and Twitch. So if you are popping in, or if people pop in, we will divert the conversation as appropriate, depending on how the chat goes or whatnot. If you've been listening to the ToB podcast for a while, you know I don't love to do solo shows, and the reason for that is I love to hear myself talk. Well, and people would probably laugh at that and probably say that's true. I don't actually think that, but what I do think is that I would love to hear other people talk more than me, generally speaking. And as much as it's fun to just go off on hour-long diatribes, I prefer to have a broader conversation. In this case, though, you got to do what you got to do, right? And we'll make this a good one. Like I said, it's weird. We're doing weird stuff. It's Halloween. It's almost midnight. And to be honest, this is also a bit of a test run for what a setup might look like in Costa Rica, because I'm not here all the time, but for those again, longtime listeners, they know, but for those who don't, I have a house down here. I have it with my parents. But currently I'm in here. It's just me, solo. So not just a solo podcast, but a solo traveler, at least for the next week and a bit, until the family arrives. And, I paid good money for good internet, and I want to see if it is good enough to host a stream. And if so, then I will probably start building out the studio here. I've already got some soundproofing paneling Thank you to my late brother for that. I'll probably bring the rest of it down. I brought a lot of it to kind of protect what was valuable cargo on the way down. I had the TV stolen from the house here. This is a few months back, or it feels like a lifetime ago because so many things have happened since then. And it was a real bummer. It was a real kick in the nuts at the time. It still kind of is because it just meant, more work and more money and all these kinds of things. But it did present an opportunity, something that wasn't really thinking about, because what we had here before was, I think, a 55-inch TV on a really big wall. And on that really big wall, it looked really small. And it was like a kind of a low-end Google TV. And I think if people know, we'll go on a bit of a side tangent here about televisions and quality of televisions and quality of home theaters and all that. And I've become more and more obsessed with it over time. As people know, I love my OLED. I have a 65-inch LG OLED, CX7 or CX6, I think maybe, back home in Winnipeg. And I love that TV. I mean, the dark blacks and the bright HDR colors that you can get out of it. And I everyone I've ever talked to who's like, I'm buying a TV, I'm like, let me espouse the virtues of the OLED and why it's an investment, not just a higher expense, because I really do think it is. I mean, TV technology, I don't think is really improving that much. I mean, we went through the 3D phase and that was silly. And in general, I would prefer to just go bigger and with maintaining that same level of picture quality. So those levels of black levels, which the black levels I think are the craziest part of the OLED, right? It's the crisp dark blacks. But anyway, again, that's a tangent of a tangent because the TV was stolen here. It wasn't great to begin with, but we felt like we needed one, which of course is true because it's an Airbnb when we're not here, and that was a vital piece of the puzzle, right? You got to have some sort of TV. In fact, we bought cable for here, and I don't think I'll ever watch the local cable. Not just because it's in Spanish, although because some of it's not. Just because I haven't had cable TV for years, basically ever since I moved out of my parents' place, and I have never really missed it at all. Yeah, we've talked a lot about how the streaming services and the like have ruined the business model of television and movie making to some respects. But if we're just talking pure convenience to the consumer, to the user, that being us or me, I can't say I've had any regrets about being able to just turn to YouTube, Netflix, Disney Plus, and the like for my content. And it's been the only thing, I guess, even with sports, is you can subscribe to a lot of that stuff now over the air or cut the cable to get it. And then if you're like to sail the high seas, which of course we don't necessarily condone, but when it comes to sports and how fragmented sports is now, you got to do what you got to do sometimes, and there is always somewhere you can get a stream of whatever sport you want to watch at that time. So this is all a long way of saying that I convinced my parents that instead of replacing the TV here, because the TVs here are expensive and your money doesn't go far, especially with the Canadian dollar, what it is, which is crap right now, which makes things even more expensive, which is a real bummer because beers here used to be very cheap. And now to me, they're basically the same price as they would be at home, which is fine, but it's not like, you're not really saving money in that scenario. But I convinced them that we should get a projector because I can get a projector at home in Canada and bring it down with me, in my carry-on for no extra money, right? I don't have to ship it or worry that it's going to get jostled and broken in, the checked luggage and all that kind of stuff. So I did my research, and the 4K projectors as of right now, I think are a little prohibitively expensive if you're not going to be using it all the time, and you don't have a really good setup around it, a good screen, light rejecting, side rejecting screen, and all that, the bells and whistles that come with a good projector setup. But so, and I wish maybe I have it right behind me. the BenQ. This is the new BenQ 1080p projector, but it's not a traditional bulb. It transitions over to a LED lighting source, which means it's instant on, which is close to what you get with the laser projection. And you don't have to change the bulbs nearly as often, if maybe ever, as people who know that if you use LED stuff, that it just lasts forever and ever and ever. So that's all to say that we brought this BenQ new 2024 edition of their 1080p kind of like, not entry level, because I think it is a little bit higher end than that, but it is a 1080p projector, but it can downsample 4K, which means 4K content still looks really, really good. And I've set it up here in a temporary fashion because, as you can imagine, the place where the TV is full of a bunch of stuff that needs to be moved and patched and all that kind of stuff. So I can project onto that. So I've projected onto another part of the wall. And no, it's not at full size yet. I think I can go bigger, but even at not full size, it's probably like 85 inches, which is way bigger than any TV you could get, for the about $1,100 Canadian for this BenQ projector. And let me just hold 1 second. It is I have the quick start guide here. Let's find out what it says. Why does it not have the HT 2060? There you go. This is the BenQ HT 2060, and I love it. I love it. I've never had a projector before. I've never been a projector person, but I've thought about it for a while as just being like, if I really want to get that like true home theater experience, I feel like the only true way to do that is to do that with a projector. And obviously you can get very fancy with, again, these like side light rejection screens and all sorts of other bells and whistles, or back projection and all these other things. But even just with this projector set up on a stool with propped up on a stool, projecting on a, part of the wall that's not the, the main center hub of the room, with the lights out. And the thing, and the main part of what was a big factor in getting me onto this projector thing, at least for Costa Rica, was it gets dark here so fast. I mean, it's dark by 6 o'clock, pitch black by 6 o'clock, right? So, and I think if anyone, who does or who uses projectors knows that if you have a lot of light noise, it can, really affect this, the quality of the picture that you're getting. And I've definitely turned this on during the day here. And it's considerably worse picture, but I don't really watch stuff during the day. And I don't think anyone who's going to be in Costa Rica is going to be really wanting or needing to watch stuff during the daytime. You should be outside enjoying this beautiful country, not inside watching something. Although you should do that later, once the sun goes down. We're just projecting onto a white wall. Nothing special, just a matte, non-glossy paint. I think that's the big part of it too. You don't want a glossy paint if you're going to do that onto a white wall. Some projectors now, some this can do color correction. So if you have like a non-white wall, it's maybe you have you painted it some weird color, it'll do color correction for the color of the wall. But again, your still best bet is to have a white wall, and I would really recommend that. But yeah, no, it's been really great. I've been watching a lot of Justified, which is really my like guilty pleasure show. Not that it's a bad show or anything like that, but a crime procedural. It's not. I wouldn't even say it's a procedural, but a show like Justified, which is in my opinion just a Western set in modern day, is, and I'm sure that's not my opinion necessarily. I'm sure it's a opinion that's widely held and shared. I'm not the first one to come to this, but this is my first time going through this series. I'm in season 3, and I'm impressed by how well it's able to introduce new characters and weave in existing characters. And then when deaths come, I feel like they are unexpected and it's exciting. And obviously, Timothy Oliphant and his character Raylan Givens really kind of obviously steals the show, but there's a lot of really great side characters. Art Muller, his boss, and others who I think, and obviously, his like nemesis character that just had a big Walter Goggins, just had a big presence in the Fallout show, is great. But even now in season 3, and I know there's like another 3 seasons plus like the something city, Dark City or whatever, 2023 or 2024, new season or miniseries. Feels like a lot because it really feels like we're really treading a lot of the same ground, even already in season 3. And maybe they get away from that a little bit more later in the series. I'm not sure, but I will say that I do like it a lot. Is it a great test for the projector? I don't know. I'm sure I could like test out, go put on Star Wars or something in episode 3 or something like that. And I feel like that would maybe be a better test, but I really liked the color accuracy, the how bright it is. Obviously that's important for projector, but it says it's able to reproduce HDR colors, and brightness. Again, I think that might be overselling it a little bit. I think it's just a very high quality image, despite, again, it being 1080p. It's going to get, I think once it's set up, we're going to mount it on the ceiling. I think once it's properly set up, it's going to be at like 100-ish inches screen. And I think that's pretty good. And maybe a differentiator from the rental market or whatever on the Airbnb market. I don't know. You tell me in the chat or message me, email me at towerbabblepodcast@gmail.com and let me know if 100 inches as a screen in 1080p is still impressive. I don't know, because again, I haven't been in the projector game long enough to know, but I will say I'm very impressed. I think or if that would matter, I guess the other thing, let me know if it would matter to you if you were looking through Airbnbs and you saw that one had like a big projector home theater system, if that would matter to you. And I will even say this, it has speakers in it. And though obviously, just like with TVs, you don't want to go with the TV speakers if you can avoid it. We'll probably eventually get a soundbar type system for this once we kind of have the system dialed in. But I would say the audio from the BenQ projector itself is pretty good. Is like just out of the box pretty good. So long story short, very happy with this. Less happy with the state of the Canadian dollar. But again, I made this go as far as I could because bought it at home, brought it in. Getting something like this would be maybe double or triple the price if I did this all here. So that's a long way of saying welcome to Costa Rica. Happy Halloween. We're 58 minutes away from midnight, and I'm going to need to get a water here right away, which is one thing I forgot to set myself up with as I'm getting this setup going. I'm using, by the way, if you're watching the video version, again, YouTube and Twitch, encourage you to subscribe. And that way when we go live, which is I know is semi-regular in terms of like we don't have a set schedule for that. I know that can be frustrating for some viewers, but life is complicated, especially right now. The unemployment situation continues for those curious. So I'm trying to enjoy what I can in terms of vacation, which also includes a lot of work in a different capacity. So, using my what was my old work webcam, which is like an old Logitech, not that old, like an Logitech 1080p. I think decent camera, to be honest. I'm looking at myself right now on OBS, and I think it's pretty good. The lighting's half decent. I have a lamp bouncing off of a bunch of white space, and I think it's creating a good look. So, this setup is getting built out. I hope this is interesting to people because I have really no feedback here to bounce this off of. It's interesting to me, and that's because I'm the only one in this room or the only one in this house. That's going to have to be good enough. That's going to have to be good enough. Okay, so we're going to be talking about, as I said, The Lost Boys from 1997. The countdown to midnight on Halloween continues. I really wanted to get this show out so you could be listening to this maybe on Halloween. And if you are tuned in here live and you get to have that experience, I'm happy for you. But most people are going to be listening to this after the fact on the podcast. And because I think this is kind of like how it's similar. Christmas and Halloween have a similar situation here, where all things Christmas feel dumb and useless is the minute Christmas is over. Like by December 26th, it's like, get this shit crap out of here. I don't want to see it anymore. The one exception, of course, is the Christmas tree. If you have a real live Christmas tree, it can stay as long as it's alive. That's my kind of perspective on that. But Halloween, it's like as soon as November 1st rolls around, it's like if I see a cobweb or a fake spider somewhere, it loses all its appeal. So I really hope that's not the case with this episode of the podcast. I front loaded obviously with a bunch of stuff that's not Halloween related, so maybe that'll help. But let's get into The Lost Boys. This is a movie, by the way, part of the reason I couldn't get Jeremy pinned down on this, because actually we did get a recording. And if you listen to our last episode that we recorded together, episode 199, I think. So we're coming up on 200. And I think I have an interesting idea. It's not some big splashy idea for 200. But I have I think a fun kind of retrospective idea for 200. I'm not going to tell you what it is, 'cause if it doesn't pan out, I don't want people being disappointed. But I will say this. The Lost Boys is a movie that Jeremy said he fell asleep. It's a 90-minute movie. This movie's like, a really crisp hour and a half. And I know he has a kid and whatnot. So that's probably the, extenuating circumstances for why Jeremy might have fallen asleep watching this movie. And I would argue that it has a bit of a slow start. But I think, there's a reason this is considered a classic, right? It's been around for forever. It came up before I was born. Obviously, I was born in 1989. So this is pre-Julian movie, but it has so many classic vampire tropes in it. But I think it, even for 1987, is playing with them in a really fun way. It's odd because, I think for obvious reasons, this movie reminds me a lot of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the setting primarily, but it's weird how well, you could argue, vampires in California mix together. I'm not sure why that is, but it works here. And again, I think these are kind of like, whether it be the Buffy the Vampire movie, but more obviously, importantly, the series, the California setting played a huge part of it. And I think maybe we're so used to seeing California portrayed on screen because that's where so many things were shot for forever. We're kind of in an era now where so many things are shot in LA, in California. Like, there's people, I think maybe Hollywood people even begrudge Canada for having, both Toronto and Vancouver, and even to some respects Winnipeg, as being a tax haven. It's cheap to film. And so many things, especially television, are filmed in Canada, and not, so you have like Vancouver filling in for all sorts of things and Toronto filling in for New York all the time. Which is why I think it's fine. It's nice that, by the way, that Toronto got its own Law and Order finally, which, because, I'm not saying that Law and Order was filmed in Toronto for a long time or anything like that. I don't know, but so many times Toronto has stood in for New York. It's nice to have Toronto be able to just be itself every once in a while, which was true also, by the way, for the last Star Trek season, Star Trek Strange New World season 2, which had an episode where they go back into time. They, there's always a back in time-ness episode of Star Trek, always. And I didn't really love this episode particularly much, but I will say there was an episode where they go back to like 21st century Toronto, and it's just Toronto, which is a nice kind of change of pace because again, it happens so rarely. But anyway, again, side tangent. The Lost Boys. Again, this is 1987. It is, what is it rated? I have to imagine it's rated R. Rated R. Solid 7.2 out of 10 IMDb rating. Let's quickly, and because this is something we do every once in a while, let's read an IMDb review. This is a featured review by Jackson W0523, written on June 12th, the year of our Lord 2020. Okay, titled A Classic Film and One of the Best Vampire Movies I've Seen. The premise of this movie is great. I love Santa Carla and how it portrays, quote, the beach culture and the quote unquote punk culture. If you want to see nostalgia for the 80s, this is the movie to watch. The chemistry between the two main characters, Sam and Michael, is great. The film blends comedy and horror perfectly. Kiefer Sutherland was great as the antagonist. It portrays teenage vampires as cool and not cheesy. There was also a little twist at the end, which I thought worked. Yeah, I kind of largely agree with this, but they gave it a 7 out of 10. I would probably give it an 8 out of 10. There are some things that make it feel extremely dated, or at least extremely of its time. This idea, there's so many funny things. This idea that Santa Carla would be the murder capital of the world is hilarious to me. But remember the 80s, and I can't say, do you remember the 80s? Because I wasn't really there. But I can tell you what I've heard other people say about the 80s, which was that there was a lot of crime. It was a big topic of conversation at the time. And you would see New York portrayed in crime, and you'd see all like crime everywhere. Or you would see like in the near future, LA becomes a crime-riddled cesspool, right? I think Predator 2 is an example of that. Gang violence and all that stuff. And this kind of has that. Like, there's this really, I think it's funny. This movie is like 80%. Okay, maybe 80% is too much. It's like 25% B-roll of people having the best time on a boardwalk. And like, I've never been to California, but it does portray these kind of like big boardwalks with the amusement park and all the little shops and all that stuff as being like a great time. And I'm sure it is. But this movie tries to blend that with this idea that, this is a crime riddled town. And it really hammers home the like lost kid, like the Lost Boys is the title, but of like there being missing children all the time. There's like posters hanging up everywhere of missing kids. And, implication obviously being as the vampire movie that the vampires are stealing these kids. Which turns out to be true. But that like there's, barrels on fire and punks everywhere, stealing comic books from the comic book store. And there's, what do they call them? I think surf Nazis, which I guess is some sort of like combination of like a skinhead and a surfer of some kind. But even that concept, and I don't know, maybe this movie's not even the first one to do it, but for me, it's the first time it's ever jumped out at me. The idea that you would even, because it's in that title is specifically in the subtitles. It says surf Nazis when they're talking, and then also in the credits. So, I'm not just making this term up. And it's just really funny. It feels like a little bit comic booky in its like larger than life nature that portrays this like coastal town, this quaint coastal town that's riddled with crime. One of my favorite scenes is the beach party with the super jacked dude who's like ripped and tanned and playing the saxophone, which is just not something I think that you see really ever, or really like anything I would think to like imagine what would have been the 80s at the time. But, you do get to see a lot of good hair, good 80s hair and good 80s outfits here. It has a real Goonies vibe, I think, in the sense that like you have kind of A, B, and C plot in this movie. The A plot follows the older brother, Michael, played by Jason Patrick, who gets falls for this girl that he spots on the boardwalk, and that leads him into this life of becoming a vampire, right? And then you have Sam, the younger brother, played by Corey Haim, who gets, this is the Goonies side of things, gets into this like hijinks essentially with these other local kids. who like live at the comic book store. And at one point, and like I get like this movie, I feel like was designed for me, and I'm sure lots of people who are, you know, grew up as nerds or whatever feel that way. I mean, this is a Joel Schumacher joint, right? As we know from, you know, Batman and Robin. But and actually this is also a Richard Donner production, which we know from Superman, of course, and he maybe one of the greatest comic book movies of all time. But the way that they talk about comic book lore is very serious, right? Talking about red kryptonite and all these other kind of like grilling each other, quizzing each other on like, oh, do you think you know your comic books? Well, do you know this or do you know that? I think that feels like genuine. It is a little gatekeepy, which I think most people would avoid today. You don't want to create that environment. They specifically are like, hey, if you don't know your stuff, you got to get out of here, which again, I think if you're a comic book store owner, you would want to avoid that mentality as much as possible, because you want to get people in the store buying stuff, not scaring them off because they're, you know, not already part of the comic book cult or whatever. So that feels a little dated, but of the time, certainly. And then the C plot follows their mom, Lucy, who lost her job, or, you know, I can't remember the exact details there, but had to move in with her dad, who's just titled Grandpa, played by Bernard Hughes, who's, by the way, hilarious in this movie, I think. Who seems to know about the whole vampire situation, but kind of like plays it down or doesn't really mention it much until, and that doesn't come back until later. But, and her plot, which is like trying to meet a new guy and get a new job. And she ends up getting a job at a movie rental place, which again, those don't exist in 2024, but you know, is definitely a vibe. And also an area or a location in the film that we get to spend like no time in. We spend, you know, much more time in the comic book store, but even that, like, not enough time, I would argue, in those like timeless. I mean, timeless isn't the right word, but like time box, like trapped in time moments and locations, which is again a comic book store of that type and a movie rental store of that type. But it's cool that they're in there. Again, it's like written, obviously, and this is movies written by Jan Fisher, James Jeremias, and Jeffrey Boehm. And obviously they had a respect for these things. Not as novel, obviously, in 1987, but feels novel now to rewatch it. And by the way, for the record, I should mention, this is the first time I'd ever seen this movie. Again, I know that this is a classic, but and I certainly know why it is a classic now, just in the sense that like it has kind of this greater than the sum of its parts nature to everything. It's the setting, it's the performances, it's the characters, it's the like of its time nature, right? The big hair and the big costumes and the I wouldn't even say the gore, but like the way it handles some of that stuff, it doesn't feel silly. Although some of it does, I would argue, especially in again today's time. But I really did dig this movie. Another thing I really liked about it is really dog heavy. Lots of dogs. Dogs get a lot of play here. There's a whole hellhound scenario that is like, again, I would say it's a part of the C plot, the Lucy plot, who ends up falling for this guy named Max, who's played by Edward Herman. And it's played off as, and this is the twist, and, you know, spoilers for this movie, I think, if you're listening this far, I think, or maybe most people have seen this movie anyway, but Max is the owner of the movie store, and turns out he is the like head vampire of the area, the true big bad. Although there's this really, you know, talk about hijinks or whatever, like fun scene where Sam and his compatriots try to catch Max in the act as the vampire. Like, oh, he only comes out at night, and he's all these things that, you know, you would think are supposed to be a dead giveaway that he's a vampire, but then it turns out, oh, well, maybe not, because he can eat the garlic and all these other things. And that's another thing I like, by the way, which is that it really kind of plays with the vampire tropes in a fun way. Like, certain ones are right, certain ones are not. It kind of picks and chooses which ones it wants to honor and which ones it doesn't. But by doing that, it keeps you on your toes. Because even for me in 1987, or in 2024, a movie made in 1987, these vampire tropes were well worn and well understood at this time. Like, okay, the cross, holy water, garlic, a wooden stake through the chest, the list, like this, can't be out of sunlight. The one that this movie introduces that I think is really funny, which is that these vampires sleep upside down like bats, and their feet look like little claws. It's kind of gross, but I think it's still pretty fun. But either way, like it turns out they're like, oh no, the garlic thing isn't real, but the holy water thing is, right? So you get a little bit of everything, and again, because you don't know which one they're going to honor until like kind of establish it later in the movie in the kind of the big action set piece at the end, at the climax. It just keeps you guessing. And I think that's a well constructed screenplay. Again, so back to the dogs thing. Dogs, the hellhound situation, but there is a family dog that Sam has that even gets a kill by pushing one of the vampires into a, somehow they fill the whole bathtub with holy water by going to a local church. And this is another funny scene where they just bust into this church. I think there's like a wedding or a baptism going on, and they just fill their canteens with holy water from the spot at the door where you're supposed to, give yourself the cross and all that kind of stuff. But they managed to fill these canteens with this holy water and then fill a whole bathtub, which seems a bit excessive and or whatnot. Maybe they went to a whole bunch of churches, but it's funny because they bust in that church and the priest and everyone there just doesn't say anything. They just stare at them as they fill their water bottles. It's funny, but yeah. So the dogs they have to save the dog. The dog does good stuff. Saving the dog, by the way, at one point leads to like a whole action sub beat. Because again, these vampires can fly, and there's obviously one of the main attractions of this movie, or one of the things that I think people remember is the scene where they're testing Michael's ability to fly by jumping through the boards on the bridge, the train bridge. I was like, how do I describe this? Which is all covered in mist, and they just jump through, and then they're hanging on as the train goes over. I think it's an effective scene. It's very cool. It's a good way of showing, and Kiefer Sutherland, which I haven't really talked about. I think he has a really strong presence in this movie, but he's got a very stark look. I mean, his bleach blonde hair and the big jacket and all that stuff. It's very, it's hard. It's very 80s. I don't know other way to describe it. I think of Kiefer Sutherland and I think of things later in his career. This was not something that I think of, but I think it's a really strong performance because he comes off as endearing, which I think is important for a vampire. I think there's a romanticism around vampires, right? This idea that you could be seduced by one, right? And yes, they do the whole thing where you can be like enthralled, which is like an ability that a vampire has, which they do play with in this. Star, played by Jamie Gertz, is the kind of female lead romantic interest of the movie, and kind of love triangle scenario between Michael and Kiefer Sutherland's David character. But you need, I think, if you're going to have yes, technically Max, Edward Herrmann's character, is also a vampire. He's in his own way seducing their mom and Lucy, who I think does a great job of just being like a in that C plot, which is like her dating life just keeps getting ruined by her sons who have like seemingly no respect for her autonomy and personal life. And she's just trying to be an adult and go out and date and be, be a functioning member of society, but her kids just keep messing with things, but it's all from a good place. I think this is like, these are cliches, but I think this movie does a good job of nailing these cliches. yeah, I think again that you've got with the exception, I think, because David has some of like lackeys, like these two other vampire characters that are with him, and I just don't think they're that interesting of characters. Like they don't really get as much screen time, or they kind of look cool, but that's about as much as I think that matters there. So yeah, I mean, what else did I like? I mean, I mentioned the setting. I think again, this idea that you would have a beach town be the main setting for a vampire movie is a fun twist, because I think, when you think vampire, you think like Nosferatu, or you think like Transylvania, or like a creaky castle, Castlevania stuff, right? And by the way, speaking of, we're just talking about like, hey, what are good, spooky season shows and movies and whatnot. I think you can't go wrong with the Netflix animation or anime series for the Castlevania. There's 2 of them, I think. They're both really, really good and very gory, creepy, monster designs, lots of blood, and great action. I think the acting is great. So yeah, I mean, I'm not I think in general, Netflix is, I think, crushing it on the animation side. I've spent many hours of my life on this very podcast talking about how I think from a content perspective, Netflix has been lacking, and it has been lacking in compelling adult programming, especially in live action, for a while. I mean, we've joked about the algorithm designed nature of everything that we watch, especially on Netflix, which feels like it was, made by a robot. And that's true, especially of the reality programming that's, I guess, obviously very popular for them. So I can't, fault them necessarily, but I will say it's certainly not for me. And I think it's pretty garbage. I mean, even the stuff that like, Red Notice and some of these other movies that are supposed to, have big stars, all this stuff, come across as empty and kind of like the cotton candy equivalent of a movie where it just dissolves in your mouth and there's nothing really, maybe a light flavor left behind, but that's it. So long way of saying the animation side of Netflix, I think, is punching above its weight, especially in comparison to the live action. So anyway, back to the Lost Boys. The setting, a nice contrast to there's a really funny moment. This will stick with me forever, which is when they're driving up along the coast, because they're coming in from, they never lived on the coast before or whatever. And the kids are like, what's that smell? And they're like, Mom's like, that's the ocean, honey. And I think that's hilarious, because I think maybe if you're not used to the ocean, or maybe you've never visited the ocean before, I think most people would agree that the ocean actually smells great. You have it's got this like humid, earthy aroma to it, but it can at times be stinky, which is fair, I guess. But I just think that's a funny like thing. And then they drive past the Santa Carla sign, and then on the back in spray paint it says murder capital of the world, which again, crazy, right? And it's like, okay, if there's all these murders happening, you don't think there would be more attention paid to like how they prevent that or whatever? It seems odd, but that kind of stuff is all played in the kind of shoved under the rug. Also funny because, living in Winnipeg, and maybe some people might not know this, but living in Winnipeg, for the longest time, we were dubbed the murder capital of Canada, which I think from a like murders per, or per capita or whatever, that was true. I think there is technically more murders on a per year like number basis in Toronto and like bigger cities where there's just way more people. But yeah, we kind of punch above our weight in terms of murders in our own. So I kind of like felt for them, like this made up place of Santa Carla, because it's when you get a bad rap like that, it's hard to get out from under that. I of course love Winnipeg, so and will continue to defend it till the day I die, probably, or if the city stops existing for some reason, maybe some sort of bad accident and everyone has to move. I don't know. Okay, so talked about California, or the beachside thing. Again, fun kind of contrast to what you typically expect from a vampire movie. I will say that there is some things in here that feel a bit silly, or again, maybe just like didn't age well. So one of the things is when they first they're like, okay, we're going to go down to the boardwalk. So Sam and Michael go down to the boardwalk, and then they spot Star, which, man, the names in this movie. I mean, obviously Michael and Sam, Lucy, yeah, etc. But you have Edgar Frog and Alan Frog, the kids, the brother kids that are the kind of the Goonies types. But like, and the surf Nazi stuff, which just kills me. But maybe it's weird that Star's name is the only one that's like that. But anyway, she's very striking. Jamie Gertz in this movie. Michael spots her from, across the crowd. This is, by the way, when we see the topless saxophone player. And they're going through this party, and like they lock eyes from across the party. And maybe that's like again, that is a trope in and of itself. But this idea that she would spot this one random guy in the middle of all this thing, and then they would follow each other all through this thing. I mean, it feels contrived a little bit. I just feel like we could have come up with a better way of kind of bringing these characters together. I'm literally being nitpicky, but anyway, you get to this point where he's gonna have her join him on his motor, so they're gonna like go away together, right? But because Star is under the influence of the thrall of David, he's just like, and the way they did to show this, by the way, I think is fine. It's a little funny in retrospect. Just like he just like stares at her and like, no, you're getting on my bike, and she's just like, oh, okay, yeah, and then they like make out, which is really funny. David likes to mess with Michael, so they do this like dirt bike chase through the fog. This movie loves fog. I don't know how foggy the coast of California gets, but this is a movie thing. So, but then he almost runs him off the side of a cliff. But then he takes him back to his lair. And then, by the way, another thing that's, again, I just assume that these feel like California stereotypes, but this idea that, oh, there was this resort on the coast, but then there was this big earthquake, and then it's swallowed up by the earth, and now we have this underground resort area that we can go to. It just feels a little contrived, but they go into this underground sequence, and it's like very trippy. Like when he starts, when they start drinking the blood, and it's in this fancy bottle. I love the fancy bottle, by the way. I think it's like adds a lot to the like pomp and circumstance of the whole, like converting them. So, in a lot of vampire media, the way that you become a vampire typically is you need to drink the blood of the vampire who is turning you. So they drink your blood, you drink their blood, and that starts the turning process. And this is kind of like a shortcut version of that, where he's got some bottle of blood, and it's like they're passing it around, drinking it. But if we're following traditional vampire rules, we'd have to assume that the bottle, it has David's blood in it. But it'd be weird that he'd be drinking his own blood, like on a regular basis. And like he does, he gets kind of like a blood high, which you can substitute the blood for like doing psychedelics or maybe coke or like some sort of drug. Because yeah, it starts getting a little like hippy dippy a little bit there. And by the way, it's also funny because this movie doesn't shy away from drugs, because their grandpa definitely smokes weed and I think grows weed. In this movie, it's funny. Anyway, it's a cool sequence where Michael is kind of turned for the first time, but they add this wrinkle where you don't fully turn until you commit your first murder, which feels like a bit of a contrivance, I suppose, but it adds to the kind of the weight or the momentum of the movie, because you then still get the opportunity to have Michael out in the daylight, although he's wearing sunglasses at night and sunglasses inside, and he's sleeping all day and all this stuff. And it's kind of portrayed, and we've all been there. We've all been like, early 20s ish, partying a lot. Your parents are like, "Oh, you're such a degenerate." And maybe this is just me, but like sleeping in really, really late, staying up really, really late, getting into trouble to some degree. So like, I felt very relatable, because that's kind of how they portray it as like the real world explanation to like what's going on. But then it is a little funny, because there's a moment where Sam is like, "Look in the mirror," and he turns around and he's only half turned, because you can see partially through him in the mirror, which is, because again, you can't see vampires in the mirror. Okay. Not sure why that wasn't the first test Sam did on Max, but neither here nor there. But so he's half turned, and this is what confirms to Sam after this kind of like scary sequence where Michael comes after Sam, but then their dog saves him. So again, another big moment for the dog. But this is when they're like, okay, we got to figure out how to like fix this problem, right? And that's kind of where the A plot and B plot start to merge together. The C plot doesn't really merge together until the very end of the movie, basically. When the grandpa drives through the wall with his like old like jalopy he's got with the funny horn. So Sam, again, he hooks up with the Frog Brothers, who are basically, speaking of Halloween, basically always in Halloween costumes. One's dressed up as Rambo all the time. I think they might both be dressed up as like a version of Sylvester Stallone in some degree. I'm sure I'm not clocking that as I should be, but implication seems to be they wrote their own comic book, like wrote and drew their own comic book about sort of how to survive a vampire, which raises a lot of questions. Like, did they already, and I know there's vampires in the town or whatever, but doesn't seem to be like that many. There's 4 as far as we can tell. The 3 kind of like teenage ones, and then the like head vampire, which is Max. So yes, they're probably doing a lot of killing, for that number or whatever. It doesn't unclear how much they have to feed. It seems like every night they're like murdering somebody, which is a lot. But like, okay, so does that mean the Frog Brothers, who are like, very much like mid-age teenagers, they've survived attacks from vampires? Or like, where did they come up with this information? Or do they build it off of like our pop culture, or their pop culture understanding of how vampires work? Which is why we get that whole series of different approaches to how to do how to take down a vampire. Some work that some don't, right? But I just think the whole thing is funny, because like, okay, so he's got this comic book and he's like, oh, it's just like what's happening in my comic. Like, how does that work? I want to know. Inquiring minds. Either way, once they like decide that they're going to not, he's like, I'm not going to turn. I don't want to turn. I don't want to become a vampire. And then that's when David really becomes the true villain of like, we're going to have the in boss battle situation, because they go and infiltrate their lair and stab one of them through the chest with a wooden stake, and there is a lot of blood. And I will say, I do think it's very satisfying watching those vampires like die in different ways, because they all get different deaths. Yes, the main house, like so they kill the vampire. That's when David's like, okay, once it turns to dark, like the nighttime, I'm coming for you guys, and it's all over, right? I will say, you could probably make this movie for, pennies on the dollar today, because the way that they never show, or they barely ever really show the vampires flying. It's usually shot in POV with just like what you could do a drone shot today, right? And I guess back then maybe helicopter shots or maybe like a crane shot or something. But you could easily get away with doing that in that same way if you really wanted to do it that way. But yeah, like you get a stereo. The stereo kills one of them. You get the dog that kills one of them. At the holy water, and I think that's a really good kill. And I just think like this movie is very clear about how this is all going to play out. Michael is going to get seduced into this whole thing because of the girl. He's now going to help save the girl and the kid with the help of his brother, who has been learning how to stop vampires secretly in the background this whole time. And then the mom is going to get caught up in it because Max turns out is the main vampire who is going to try to seduce them all into becoming a big vampire family. And the big showdown is Michael versus David, and then Max shows up at the end, and then they're all killed. Again by the grandpa who made he's like, I'm sick of vampires or whatever. It's funny line. But it doesn't really waste its time. The big climax finale doesn't really drag itself out. But it does do a very 80s thing, which is just like the movie's over now. We've told the story. There's no like prologue or epilogue or anything. It's just like, we're done. Goodbye. Credits. So, fair enough. Again, all in all, I think this is a really, really, really fun movie. I totally understand why it kind of has this cult classic status, because the vibe, it's just all vibes. This movie's all vibes, really, right? It's the vibe of the beach town. It's the vibe of the sexy vampires. It's the vibe of the 80s-ness of it all. It's the vibe of the cliches and how they all play together and how they're played on the twists and all that stuff. It's just a fun movie. And Joel Schumacher, I think, knows how to make a fun movie. You can't argue that Batman and Robin, at the very least, isn't fun. So, I all around, really like this movie. So the next question would be, what is next for the month of November? Jeremy had something in his back pocket. I asked him to tell me what it was. He did not get back to me today. So it will remain a secret. I will probably mention it on one of the following, we'll do a podcast in a few podcasts in November, of course. And we'll announce that on then. And of course, I'll also mention it in the Discord. So if you don't know, and maybe this is the first, because this will be going out to the wider podcast audience, and it will not just be a Patreon exclusive. But generally speaking, the majority of our ToB Film Club episodes are exclusive to our Patreon. And our Patreon isn't huge. We don't do a ton of stuff. It's really a main way to kind of help support the show. If you like what we do and you want to show your support, that's the best way to do it. But you do get a little bit of something for your money. You get access to our Discord channel, which is it's not like a group chat that's blowing up nonstop in terms of like there isn't a conversation happening 24/7. But if you want to talk about a movie, or you want to talk about a show, or you want to talk about something, obviously Star Wars gets a lot of traction. There is an audience there to have a conversation, and it's very civil, and everyone gets along, and it's great. So you get access to that, but you also get access to our exclusive Film Club episodes, which we've been doing now for years, and there's many back catalogs of them you listen to. I think the first one we did was Jurassic Park, which was a great movie, of course. Although I cringe at the idea of going back and listening to that, because who knows? I don't think we dialed in the format quite at that point. And I could argue that maybe we still quite haven't, because I'm doing this one by myself. So, yeah, I usually will drop about 3 or 4 public ones a year, just to give people a taste, especially if it's a big movie. Or related to a movie that is in theaters. I think we did one for Twister that we dropped to the public as well, and stuff like that. So that's patreon.com/Tower Babblecast. And we are, by the way, at 14 minutes to midnight right now. So I'm not going to just like fill time here. We are going to continue the conversation, not just on The Lost Boys, but just on, spooky movies in general. We'll continue the conversation, but just a little bit more of the kind of the commercial here. So give me a break until we turn the page over to the kind of the back half or the final segment of the show. But I would remind folks, if you're not doing so already, and I was talking about this today with some folks on the beach, but Twitter is a real cesspool of doom and gloom. And it's really hard to understand whether or not that is because the world is more doomy gloomy than it has been in the past. And I would argue that that's partially probably true. Or if the algorithm and the nature of what gets attention online has slowly become more cynical and poisoned over time. And I think that's probably also a bigger factor. Because I will say, when I first joined Twitter, now known as X, but I refuse to call it that. I hate it. It's such a stupid name. It means nothing. It has no, you're going to get rid of the word tweet? Come on. To replace it with post? What the hell are we doing here? When I first joined Twitter, it really felt like, hey, let's talk about funny memes and let's talk about movies. And, there's still film Twitter still exists, but it even that's kind of turned very cynical. In a lot of respects, there's a lot of discourse around, the why movies with female leads don't work and or why similar movies with male leads that fail don't get the same reaction of like, see, movies of like men, they don't work, and that kind of stuff. Like that kind of thing feels like played out and tired, and not really the type of conversation that I feel like used to be on Twitter. And maybe I'm looking back on it on rose-colored glasses, but I will say that I miss the old days. And I still try to occasionally engage with Twitter, especially on the Tower of Babel account. In that respect, getting excited about things that are coming, talking about what, and theorizing about what's good or what could be, what's going to be a part of the next Marvel thing, or looking ahead at the next Superman movie and all that kind of stuff. That still tickles me. So follow us on Twitter at Tower Babblecast. That's TowerBabblecast on Twitter, as well as on Facebook. You can find us on facebook.com/Tower Babblecast as well. And of course, I mentioned Facebook and Twitch. If you haven't, YouTube and Twitch. If you haven't done so, I would encourage you this just to see what it's like. Go over to our website, towerofbabel.ca, and just see all the stuff that we do. Whether it's the main show, whether it's a link to the Patreon, whether it's Small Screen Star Wars. I really would like to do a bonus small Screen Star Wars episode with Rachel, who's my co-host on that show, soon before Skeleton Crew. So we'll try to make that happen. So I was actually trying to get her on for this, but she hasn't seen this movie in years, The Lost Boys. So fair enough. And it was pretty last minute. But yeah, we do a lot of stuff. In fact, there's an old blog on there. There's some things that when I was trying to write more, that you can find at towerbubble.ca/blog. A lot of it's pretty outdated, but some of it still gets traction. I think one of the articles I wrote, or a little blog post I wrote, was titled "How to Do Batman's Voice Right," and I think people go to that page. It gets a lot of hits because I think people want to know how to a tutorial on how to do a Batman voice, like how do I talk like this or something, right? That's not what the article's about. It was about and I don't even remember exactly, but I think it was about how can you do Batman in live action without putting on some stupid Christian Bale voice. And I think at the time, this was right around BVS-ish, probably, when I thought that the digitized version of the voice that Ben Affleck was doing was an interesting and kind of a novel way of approaching it. The other thing that I thought about at the time was just dub over, have a character in there, an actor in there, and then just use Kevin Conroy's voice. And, the late Kevin Conroy, but who of course it will always be Batman. All right, 9 minutes to midnight. So that leaves kind of one main topic, which I've touched on occasionally, on this show, which is that like my general disinterest in scary movies, horror films. I think from an intellectual level, I understand why they have an appeal. It's like a roller coaster. You get to feel the thrills of being chased by a murderer, right? From the comfort and safety of your own living room, right? Now, I've mentioned this before. I've talked about this a lot, which is that, and this is, I've certainly not coined this. I'm pretty sure it's a Roger Ebert quote, but that movies are empathy machines. They're designed to, and empathy, obviously, this a concept of like feeling, understanding and feeling other people's emotions, right? And obviously, when we're watching a movie, if a movie's working well, what it's doing is presenting an ability for you to feel things. That there's the Nicole Kidman thing from AMC or whatever, but it's like, somehow crying feels good in a place like this. And I think that sentiment holds true, which is that like when a movie's doing its best work, it's making the viewer feel emotions. I think if it's not making you feel anything at all, then it's failing in its job as a piece of art, which is, I think at its heart, art is designed to evoke feeling and emotion from the subject, right? And if you're reading that's true if you're reading a book or looking at a piece of looking at a painting or seeing a play, or again watching a movie, which is that like you watch a romantic comedy, you can feel the highs and the lows of the romance, right? Something that you probably do get to feel in your regular life, but not in the same way and not as often and not as controlled. And certainly like bursting out into tears in the middle of a street or whatever, like what happens in a rom-com, isn't generally looked upon positively by society. I think people would look at you and say, oh, you're just a big crybaby or whatever, right? Or it'd say, oh, they're very emotional or all these things. But when you're watching a movie, you get the luxury of not having to deal with those stigmas. You can just feel the feelings, right? And I would even argue at its best, it allows you to feel feelings that are complex and hard for you to articulate and understand, and especially in a real world setting, and prepares you for scenarios where you might feel those feelings again, but now have a better understanding of how to deal with them in a real way. Which is why, as someone, I'm not saying I'm some empath. I really feel people's feelings or whatever. I don't know if that's true or not. I can't say I'm any more or less than probably the average person. But I will say that I do make a concerted effort to allow art to affect me in whatever way. I think I cry probably at a movie at the drop of a hat. If it's a really sad hat dropping, right? Or, the inclusion of animals or dogs, especially now that I have one of my own. That's certainly given me a soft spot for that concept. But horror movies, and I think, maybe it's because when I was exposed to them at a young age, actually it goes further back. Let's do a little bit of we have 5 minutes here until midnight. Let's go back in time to young Julian. He's out of kindergarten. He's in grade 2, 3-ish. Early reading. I'm at Daniel's house. Former co-host Dan, who is living in Amsterdam right now. So happy for him. I was at Dan's house for a sleepover, and he would have, and it wasn't sure if it was him or his older sister or whatever, would read Goosebumps books. And the covers of those Goosebumps books scared the shit out of me. Hands coming out of sewers or I can't remember all the different like specifics of what these title covers are. If you know Goosebumps, right? I remember having to call my parents or having Dan's parents call my parents to come pick me up because I couldn't sleep because the Goosebumps books were scaring me. And I'm totally fine with saying this because I was literally a child. Okay. So make fun of me all you want, but I was literally a child. So whatever. So I remember just being, even at that age, being like very easily affected by like the idea of, hey, we want you to be scared. I'm like, okay, I'll be scared. I am scared now. So, I remember someone I can't remember who, someone was watching The Ring, and I came in and the Ring was on, and I was like, this is absolutely too terrifying for me. Like, I don't remember which movie specifically terrified the hell out of me, but I remember that one. I think I was at a hotel that was being viewed at. And I just, when movies draw the suspense and like the jump scares, I'll tell you this, there is a sequence in Nope that just murdered me. It's like, the thing is, it's totally designed to get this reaction out of you, but it was so effective for me that and I remember going to see Nope, and the trailer for the first Smile movie came on, and even that trailer was like, I'm not interested. I do not like this. And even recently there was another like horror trailer that came on before a movie I went to see at theaters, and I looked away because I'm like, it just wasn't what I was looking to. I'd rather just look away, look at my phone during the trailers for this bit, listen to all the screaming and the stabbing or whatever the hell's going on. Do I think like Scream and those kinds of things are like the same? I don't think so. I think a slasher is different than a horror. But I will say that it just really got to me. And the scene in Note, by the way, is this scene where it's like, oh, we finally believe that there's aliens. That we've kind of established that there's aliens. And then they're like, oh, maybe it's just a ship. And then the aliens are going to come down, and he's going through this like stables. And then it turns out it's just people with an alien mask on. But there's like 2 jump scares in there. The suspense is like dialed up to 11. And I was sweating. Like my hands were clammy, and my heart was pounding. And here's the thing. I know people love that experience. I hate it. I don't like it. I am stressed out enough in my regular life that adding stress to my life via the form of a horror movie does nothing for me. So that is to say that I don't, and maybe it's that like, maybe I need to be able to be like, oh, well, this is just a movie. There's a set. These are not real people, yada, 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 yada. But the whole point of the movie is to make you believe, to suspend your disbelief. So to like, be like, oh, well, just enjoy it by pretending it's not real, feels like it's defeating the whole purpose entirely to me. So anyway, it's 11:59. This is my story about why horror movies don't do it for me, which is maybe a good balance for an episode that's going to come out after Halloween anyway. But it's going to turn to midnight right away. So I'll say one last time, happy Halloween from the Tower of Babel podcast. I hope to do more streams from Costa Rica soon. There's going to be plenty of ToB content coming down the pike. As I said, I'm angling to do a small screen Star Wars bonus episode before Skeleton Crew, and it just turned midnight. So welcome to November. We're that much closer to a new year, that much closer to this nightmare American election being over. Though it's unclear if that nightmare will continue past the election date or not. Probably will. Again, episode 200 of the ToB podcast is coming. I would like to do a mini, maybe I'll do another solo episode. This has actually been pretty fun, if I'm being honest. This is hasn't been that hard for me. One might say that I'm a little long-winded, considering I've been sitting here talking to myself for over an hour. But there's been a lot of stuff that I've been watching, and it's not just Justified. Whether it's The Penguin, Terminator Zero, there's a million things that I've been watching. I've mentioned some of these things on the podcast, but I think it's probably worth a little episode to just catch up on the things that are relevant, or at least recent from a pop culture standpoint, that are worth talking about. So I'll hope to get that one of those in soon. And then, of course, there's always new news coming out of Hollywood worth talking about. So all in all, thank you for enduring a solo Julian show. I know that sometimes, the prospect to some of hearing me just talk for an hour or over an hour straight might be a horror movie in and of itself, a nightmare all of its own kind. But for those who do enjoy this, thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being a fan of ToB. This content, making this content is some of my favorite stuff. I love it. It really, it gets easy to get caught up in the day-to-day minutia of trying to survive in this hellscape that we call the planet Earth. And then every once in a while, I sit down and I record a show, usually with somebody, which is helpful. And I just feel energized. I'm on top of the world when I get to record these episodes. And the fact that we have an audience that gives a shit to listen makes it all the worthwhile. So thank you for supporting the show. If you are a patron, and if you don't want to, I know things are expensive. I certainly understand that, which means everyone who's supporting the show, that allows us to basically run this show at no cost to any of the hosts directly, is just a massive relief and weight off our shoulders to really just not have to think about that and just think about making fun content and talking about movies and TV and video games and all the things that we love to talk about. We don't talk about video games much anymore. Hard to find the time. But I just really, again, I can't express enough thanks to our patrons for supporting us, helping make the show real. And if you can't support us financially, that's okay. Leave us a review on iTunes, subscribe on YouTube or Twitch, Apple Podcasts, not iTunes anymore. I'm living in the past here. Or Spotify, any of those things. Engage with on Spotify. Spotify is a great platform for podcasting, and we're on there. So, I just thought something crawled up my leg. I'm not gonna lie, it terrified the shit out of me. I just had my own little jump scare. It turns out it's nothing. Anyway, on that lovely note, I will wrap it up there. Thank you for listening. And as always, there'll be more ToB very soon. We'll talk to you then. Bye. Late breaking news here. I was just about to post the show, and Jeremy finally got back to me about what movie we're doing for the month of November. So if you're still listening this late, and then after all the music, kudos. I'm really excited for you. You'll be the first to know about what movie we're doing for November. So this will be Patreon exclusive, and we're going to be doing the 2000 film rated PG-13, titled Frequency. Here's the logline. An accidental cross-time radio link connects father and son across 30 years. The son tries to save his father's life, but then must fix the consequences. So it got a timey-wimey movie, which is cool, and directed by Gregory Hoblit, written by ToB Emmerich. and starring none other than Dennis Quaid. Jim Caviezel's in there as well. Sean Doyle, Elizabeth Mitchell, Andre Brower, and Noah Emmerich, among others. So, yeah, I've never heard of this movie, but Jeremy seemed very excited about watching this last time he hinted at it. And, I'm not one to judge, and I like a time travel movie. So I'm excited. Again, the title is Frequency, and from the year 2000, and that's what we'll be doing for the month of November. And before then, again, more ToB before that. But look forward to the film club in November. Frequency. We'll talk to you soon.